Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio, it's time for Family Business Radio. Showcasing outstanding family businesses and the advisors who assist them.
All right, good afternoon. You're listening to another episode of Family Business Radio. I am your host, Anthony Chen. Today we have three amazing guests with us, kind of sharing their insights in terms of working with family businesses, transactions, and succession planning. So first off, I would like to introduce and welcome to the show Rick Calabrese and Joe Bergen with Commonwealth M&A LLC. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. Yeah, our pleasure to be here. Very excited.
All right. So kind of share with us kind of your origin stories, like what got you into specifically succession planning for family businesses?
Maybe Rick,
Joe,
I'll
I
start.
can start here.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll lead off. You can back clean up. So it's a long story. To shorten it, I'd say for me personally, Joe has a little bit of a different story. So I'm a CPA, licensed CPA and attorney. I practiced law in exclusively the lower middle market my entire legal career. So I saw firsthand the tax side, the legal side, the negotiations, the documents, and also as being the trusted counsel to business owners through that process, the emotional aspect of sales. So I really enjoyed working with small businesses in particular, given my personal background, and it naturally led to opening our company here and the combination of skill sets that Joe and I have. Joe, I don't know if you want to take it from there.
Yeah, so my background, I used to do buy-side mergers and acquisitions for Johnson & Johnson, so big multi-billion-dollar transactions. Through that experience, got a lot of firsthand exposure to how a good deal should run and how a client should be represented. But quickly noticed that in the smaller transactions, call it the more family business space, sub $50 to $100 million in revenue, the amount that representation was lacking. And similar to Rick, we both grew up in small business families. That always rubbed me the wrong way. Always thought to myself, why can't a small business be represented the same way a bulge bracket investment bank would represent a transaction? So that's been our whole goal with the company of Commonwealth M&A. We want to bring sophisticated M&A support to lower middle market businesses.
Right, now kind of share with us a little, what was both of your family business backgrounds?
So I'll start. So my father inherited a landscaping business in suburban Philadelphia from his father, who tragically he got sick with cancer when my father was in his 30s. So he sped up the timeline there on taking it over. So my entire life, I saw firsthand what owning a small business means to the owner, the impact on their employees, the impact on their customers, the economy overall, and most importantly, I think that the business owner's family. So I grew up all aspects. You see it all when you're the owner's oldest son, right? So I was out working labor with the laborers, mulching, pruning. It gets hot, not as hot as Atlanta, but it does get pretty hot and humid up here in Philadelphia in the summer. Quickly realized I wanted to focus more on the office side of the business. So I also helped with the accounting. And that's when I went to college, got my accounting degree and law degree. And then for my father, it just became the right time for him. All his goals aligned to sell. And I actually handled the transaction for him as the advisor and the lawyer about 4 years ago. And I kid you not, he's actually in Lake Como right now in retirement, enjoying himself. So that's the dream I hope to achieve for our clients. And so I'm very passionate about small businesses, small business owners. And we honestly, and Joe, tell me if you disagree, I think that's the thing we kind of think above all else is when we represent a client, we put ourselves in their shoes and try to understand the importance of the transaction for them. And I think that shines in our services.
And then, so my father, he was a bricklayer and stonemason for a long time. So obviously growing up, I grew up on job sites. That's what I like to say, climbing in rock piles and helping them unload the truck at the end of the day and load it up for the next day. But he actually found himself owning a auto body business after his brother had tragically passed away. And then unfortunately, he had passed away shortly thereafter that. My mom was left holding the business to try to sell it. So that was a front row seat into what that process looked like and how broken it was at a pretty young age. But even in addition to that, cousins, family members, it's a lot of members within my family operate and own small businesses. So it's something that I'm super passionate about.
We definitely want to make sure it's not just having the know-how, but for people to understand kind of your background, what's driving your passion in helping this market segment out. And as you're coming in, bringing your high level corporate experience, now you can have that white glove service, or as you mentioned, the people who really should be receiving that kind of level of detail and attention and care, which kind of segues into the big question of, for a lot of these small family business owners, they don't even know, okay, what is my business worth? And sometimes they go, it's just me, or maybe it's an auto mechanic shop, or it's just a couple employees. Like, how do they even figure out what the value of the business is and going to market?
Yeah. So what I always like to say is, it sounds like a simple answer, but your business is worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it. Super simple answer. But because that's true, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not ways that we employ to try to get a target valuation on a business. And even that is pretty simple. Most buyers and most business valuators, they anchor business value to a multiple of EBITDA, right? So think of it, what I like to do in that scenario, I like to equate it to real estate. I think people are familiar with the concept of price per square foot and square footage to value a commercial property or even some residential properties. The same logic applies to businesses. In that analogy, your EBITDA or your business's cash flow, that's the square footage of a property. That's objective, that's measurable. We can go in and calculate what that number is. The more intangible aspect is that price per square foot, or the multiple in the context of a business sale. Every buyer is going to ascribe a different multiple based on how much they want the business, the quality of the business, what the business has that the buyer needs. Does that business have a market that they want? What industry is it in? How much of the revenue is recurring? There's an endless amount of variables that could impact what the multiple is. So two businesses with the exact same EBITDA can sell for very different prices depending on those factors that I'd outlined.
So we fast forward. All right, I know in general where my business value would be. When would be the right time to make the decision? Okay, time to sell a family business, because the stereotype is like, well, I want to make sure that I pass from one generation to the next. But the next question is, if I don't have anyone to pass it on to, when is the time to have that discussion or even planning to start selling the family business?
Yeah, I can take this one, Joe. I think, unfortunately, Anthony and team, there's no perfect time to sell your business. Just there's no perfect time to get married. There's no perfect time to have kids. There's no perfect time to enter the stock market, sell stock. Like, you get where I'm going here, right? So I'll say there's a right time to sell your business, and it's when a lot of your goals in your business are met, right? So how many boxes can you check in terms of your goals? For example, your personal goals. And am I mentally and emotionally ready to move on from my business? Am I healthy? How am I doing physically? My family, how are they doing? Are my kids through college yet? Am I feeling burned out? Did COVID and all the stress with that really take a lot out of me? So all these questions are things that a business owner should be asking themselves consistently and updating their own scorecard, so to speak, on, are they meeting their goals? And obviously the best time to sell the business is when things are going well. That's counterintuitive, but the best time to sell your business is when it's peaking, it's growing, it's healthy, just like the owner, excuse me. If the owner's if healthy, doing well, that's going to get the business the top value, the top multiple. Unfortunately, a lot of times we see this too often, where a business owner comes to us where the business didn't have a good couple years in a row, or unfortunately their health is starting to decline, and we can obviously help them in those instances, but they're unfortunately not going to get the top price. And secondly, I'd say, is the business ready to sell? What's the business doing? Are the financials cleaned up? Is there a strong leadership team in place outside of the owner? How's the customer concentration? Is it limited, or all the revenue associated with a few big customers? Are there systems in place that don't rely on the owner? All these things are just boxes to check. And when you can, as the owner, sit down and say, hey, I checked a lot of these boxes per my plan, that I'd say is the right time to sell.
Then to follow up on that, because you mentioned using the term the right time, when we're healthy and being able to be out in the lake and reap the
sounds
fruits,
nice, huh?
Reap the fruits of our labor. The next question is, okay, I want to have my cake and eat it too, or maybe have an extra cake. Like, how can someone who want to be able to, quote unquote, cash out, but still be involved in the business, or still have some form of control, or another phrase, call it taking some chips off the table?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that question a lot from our clients, and It's often kind of misunderstood. I guess I can go over probably the two main options for this. The most popular and the most well-known is called rolling equity, or otherwise in the business, a partial liquidity event. Try to simplify that a little bit with an example, maybe. The most common way this happens is with a private equity buyer. They'll go to the business owner and say, hey, the purchase price for your business, to make it easy, is $1 million. How do you feel about selling me 70 to 90%? Well, in this example, we'll pick the middle number, 80% of your business today. So I'll give you $800,000, right? 80% times $1 million. And that remainder, the 20% or the $200,000, you can roll over into the new entity that the buyer, will create, that will now be the successor to your business. And that rollover, if done properly through lawyers and tax advisors, is tax deferred, actually. So that $200,000, the owner will not pay tax on until, per private equity's model, resells that business in, say, 2 to 5 years. So it's a great mechanism that has a lot of positives for both sides, the buyer and the seller, and that's why it's so popular. So from the buyer's perspective, they get your continued involvement and leadership as the owner. You're incentivized to keep performing, right? Because you want your rollover equity to be more valuable. The private equity group has to put up less cash and less debt, which reduces ultimately their overall risk profile of your business. And Joe will probably talk more about this, but that's what the multiple is ultimately based off, is the risk profile of your business. So there's a lot of positives to them. To the seller, like you said, you get to de-risk. In my example, the owner now has $800,000 in their pocket, and subject to some things in the purchase agreement, that's all but guaranteed money now. So the economy could tank. There could be significant impact on them, their health or anything, but that money they have now, right? So that's how you can de-risk the business. And then on the flip side, the 20%, in my example, the rollover piece, otherwise known as the second bite of the apple, hopefully when the private equity group does well, you help build up that business. When it sells again in 3 to 5 years, that 200,000 hopefully is worth 300,000, 400,000, and you helped contribute to that firsthand. So in control of your own destiny, so to speak. Now, I do want to be fully transparent, right? There's no guarantee that second bite increases in value. That's always a possibility. It's a private investment, right? Just like the stock market, investments can go up and down. Hopefully you can work with an M&A advisor, your team, to pick the right partner where you feel pretty confident in that investment. Second option is, a different route where you could gradually sell some of your stock or ownership or membership interest in an LLC to either a key employee or a family member in the business. So this way is a lot different in that you, the owner, can maintain whatever amount of control you want. You could even sell all the stock for distribution purposes, but keep the voting shares. There are dozens of ways to structure this. And this is what I really enjoyed doing most when I was an attorney, is sitting down with the client, getting strategic, understanding their goals and interests, and developing a plan around that. The downside with this option, I'd say, is you're not running a full leveraged sell side process and getting the top private equity and strategic groups bidding on the business. So 9 times out of 10, the upfront purchase price will be lower than going to an open market, and you'd be probably getting paid over a longer period of time. But again, there's pros and cons to everything. So hopefully that's a good summary of the two most popular options.
Thank you. Then, since you brought up private equity, what is the common misconceptions when people think of when you use private equity? Okay, we can bring someone in to help you get a second bite or buy out completely.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that people don't know about private equity, especially small business owners. So the first thing I would say about private equity is they're just people, right? Oftentimes when we start introducing them and facilitating conversations between buyer and seller, there's a sense of intimidation from our sellers in conversing with private equity. But the reality is they're just people. And what I always say is if you want to understand people, you need to understand the incentives, right? And for private equity, for them, the way they are compensated, it's all about returns on investment. So what does that mean? Their incentive is to purchase the business for as fair a price as possible. I don't say as low as a price as possible, because that's what M&A advisors and investment banks are for, or to ensure that it's not as low as possible. As fair as possible to grow the business and then potentially sell that business. With that, it's all about the numbers. And I think that's one of the biggest shocks to our clients is, don't they want to know about how many miles are on my trucks, or don't they want to see the facility or meet with the employees? Oftentimes they do want to meet with the employees, but the reality is the way that these deals are structured, it's all about the numbers. And we had mentioned EBITDA in a prior example, it's all about your trailing 12 months, right? I think that's a surprise for sellers oftentimes as well. As they say, I had a great 2023. 2023 is ancient history at this point if we're entering a transaction now. And that EBITDA, that needs to hold up and survive through a 60 to 90-day diligence period after we agree to a purchase price, right? That diligence period, I think another misconception from sellers that as soon as they sign that letter of intent, their business is sold. It's not sold. There's a 60 to 90-day diligence period that's a full-blown colonoscopy. And our job as M&A advisors is to ensure that through that diligence process, you're being represented with someone that has your best interests at heart and ensuring that private equity firm doesn't have an excuse to retrade the deal or lower the purchase price. There's a lot we could say about private equity, but I think the important takeaway is they're just people. They value relationships. We really like when our sellers and buyers can develop that relationship, but it is important to keep in mind what their incentives are.
And I like that graphic imagery for a surprise for an M&A seller for the first time, a 60 to 90-day long colonoscopy. One session is enough, but you're talking about a marathon.
Yeah.
And they haven't really experienced that in terms of having someone kind of check under the roof or just everything inside out, every single stone and pebble. And sometimes I would tell my clients, like, hey, if you were the buyer, if it's your money, what would you be looking at? Oh yeah, well, I'll be looking at everything. Why would you expect someone to be acting differently? Which kind of then follows segue to the next question would be, for someone who's listening to this, okay, I think I could handle this by myself. How hard could it be? I'll just put on the sign for sale like I'm selling my home. I then sell some couple home moves myself. Obviously, it's a lot more involved and complicated than that. Kind of share with us kind of a story of someone who tried on their hand, or you came in and really demonstrated value in helping change your trajectory and helping them avoid some major pitfalls that people would try doing it themselves.
Yeah, so this is something we see quite frequently. What I like to say is, and I think buyers who have tried to do it themselves, there are success stories out there, but buyers who have tried to do it, or sellers, I should say, that have tried to do it themselves and failed, quickly realize this isn't the type of financial transaction where you want to learn on the job, especially when you're going against a professional business buyer, like a private equity firm. An M&A advisor or an intermediary or an investment bank, that's the exact purpose that they serve, is to ensure that your interests are well represented against someone who does this for a living, right? Because your intermediary, your M&A advisor, your investment bank, they also do that for a living. They understand what's fair, what's market. And then I think almost as important as that is ensuring that the business is going to transact at a fair price, that you're not selling it for an amount lower than you otherwise could. We've equated a few things back to real estate, but it's, everyone's received those letters in the mail to purchase their home cash, right? It's no different in the context of business. They would, for whatever reason, no one would ever really do that with their home. It's the same thing with the business. What we like to tell sellers that are receiving unsolicited interest is that you shouldn't really settle for a buyer in your inbox. And odds are, if buyers are reaching out to you unsolicited, you're probably running a really good business. And we can line up for you hundreds of buyers that want a good piece or want a piece of a good business. And again, I'll just bring it back to, it's the most important financial transaction of your life. Do you really want to learn on the job while going toe to toe with a professional acquirer?
And Rick, your perspective?
I obviously agree with everything Joe just said. I'll give a different spin and maybe the emotional side of the transaction that the seller, it maybe not be quite prepared for. So it's important to have an M&A advisor or investment banker to kind of meet in the middle, because there's going to be dozens of extremely difficult conversations that have to happen to sell your business. There's going to be disagreements. If you're rolling equity and going to be a partner with this person, do you really want to go toe to them for 12 rounds and then say, oh, we're best friends now, let's get to work? That's the necessary function of a intermediary, is to serve that role and be that voice box to have those tough conversations and fight for their client. And just like a good lawyer would do it at trial, it's very similar in this situation. So a lot of value can be added there. And not just that, but helping them understand that it's a roller coaster, right? We're all excited at the beginning when we get the offer, and then we're going through diligence and we're a little stressed out about all the information we have to provide. And why are they asking me this question, Rick? I already answered that question 10 different times. Why are they asking me it 11 times? And Joe and I and the advisors have to step in, explain, like you said, hey, they're spending a lot of money to buy your business. And it's not like real estate where you can hide some things in real estate, right? But you can go see it, you can touch it, you can walk it. A business has some components like that, right? You have trucks and employees and maybe a property, but a lot of it is intangible. To go back to Joe's first point, business is an intangible asset. Its worth is what the market will pay. So you really have to understand and be ready for all things that a deal throws at you. And if you haven't done it before and you don't have the representation, you could be caught off guard and then you could have an emotional response. And the last thing you want to do is let emotion get involved in the deal. It's a business transaction at the end of the day. I know it's for a lot of their owners, and we appreciate this, right? It's been in their family for generations and the business is their baby and they really appreciate everything. So it's important then, especially to have a great deal team around you that prepares you and helps you navigate the difficulties that are involved in an M&A transaction.
Especially when you're working with a family where it's passed through a couple of generations and then having that last generation, for lack of a word, to make that tough call, that decision, all right, maybe it's time to pass the torch on to someone that's not within the family. How do you go about in terms of helping counsel them in that, or for lack of a word, kind of be a therapist in a way to handhold them through that whole transaction part? Because at that point, it's not just about the numbers. For PE, yeah, it's all about the numbers. But for this, let's call it second, third, or even really super rare, fourth generation, to hand the reins over.
Yeah, so I can start there. I have a degree from Pittsburgh in accounting and a law degree from Villanova. I think I'm going to get an honorary psychology degree pretty soon from, I don't know, a couple universities, a couple close ones. We're in Westchester, maybe Westchester. Joe will give me one. I'll be honored that. But seriously though, you're 100% right. I think Joe and I are very well prepared for that, given growing up in those businesses, right? In a family business and seeing good weeks, seeing bad weeks, helping navigate employee issues, things like that. And at the end of the day, you have to keep bringing them back to my first question I answered. I think we had a plan. Right? We didn't just decide today we're going to sell our business. We had a reason for doing this. We had a plan. You have to trust us in getting over these hurdles, but there's a reason why we're doing this. It's the best thing for you now. And if the deal changes to where that's not the case, right, then that's totally fine. But ultimately, the decision is with the client. But we try our best to explain every aspect of and prepare our clients such that they're prepared. They knew this was coming. It's not a punch in the gut. So that's how we help with that. But ultimately, it's intense. So you just you want to do it one time and get it over with for sure. Joe, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah. So Rick, you had mentioned the personal aspect of making that decision, but I think it's also important to think about the business itself and what's best for the future of the business and your employees also, because it's a very different skill set to take a business from $0 to $5 million of revenue, to then take it to $5 to $15 million of revenue, to then take it to 15, 25 plus million dollars of revenue. And oftentimes you as a seller, it's intelligent to recognize that maybe you're not the person to do that, and that there's another organization or group out there that can do that and take the business to the next level, to allow the opportunity for some of your employees to really succeed within a larger organization. So I think it's a two-part question. It's obviously most important is, what's critical to you as the owner of that business and your personal situation. But then also two is ask yourself the question, maybe the business is better off in someone a little bit more sophisticated hands to take it to the next level.
Thank you for your insight. So for our listeners that are hearing some of these things for the first time, whether it's going through of, okay, maybe I just want to be done with this and enjoy life on the lake, or realizing, hey, I'm just not equipped to take this business to the next level. I need to find someone to take the reins over. How can our listeners best find you to learn more?
So I'd say our website, www.commonwealthna.com. That's our website. Similarly, we have a page on LinkedIn as well. I would encourage all listeners, if this is something that you're considering, even if it's 10 years into the future, it's never too early to start planning. And we're more than happy to have those conversations to ensure that you're set up for success when that day does eventually come.
Hey, even if it's ironically for our listeners coming, 10 years seems far. That's actually the ideal time. Like the sooner you can start, the more things that can be done to make changes to the trajectory. Because I imagine you might have run into situations, as you shared before, where there's a health ailment or something that's just sudden coming up. what was could have, let's call it $10 million business, but now you're under the gun or pressure, you're not going to be able to get that 10 million.
Correct. That couldn't be more true. And it just goes back to my original point is if you, like you just said, if you planned for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and work with an exit planner or your financial advisor to check those boxes, once they're checked, am I ready to dive in the pool emotionally? And then once that, it's time to jump. So while you can, we're here regardless, but it was my pleasure, obviously, to be here. Really appreciate the show and the questions. Very good questions.
Great. Thank you. Now to introduce and bringing our next guest, we have Lyle Newkirk at SeatonHill. Welcome to the show, Lyle.
Thank you, Anthony.
Kind of share us your background, like what got you into what you're doing and your unique special abilities working with business owners.
Sure. So I'm different than these two guys. Okay. My family didn't have a small business. I came up through the corporate ranks and worked for various publicly held companies and a couple of privately held companies, and often worked in M&A transactions, usually on the buy side. And one of the observations I made was the sellers were usually family businesses or smaller entities. And oftentimes they weren't ready for the transaction. And what I observed, even at a pretty young age, was these people are hurting themselves because they're not really ready for the transaction. And they could probably be doing better and looking better if they had done a little bit of prep ahead of time. So fast forward then to around the year 2020, I had sold a business I worked with in a strategic exit to a Fortune 500 company. And I was looking for my next stage in life. And I joined SeatonHill Partners, which is a group of veteran CFOs. All of us have 30 plus years of experience. And we've all served as public or private company CFOs and done multiple M&A transactions on the buy and sell side. SeatonHill focuses on the middle market and the lower middle market. So all of a sudden I realized our clients are some of the people that I worked with as I was coming along over the last 30 years or so. And we have an opportunity here to help these people get a better enterprise value when they actually do have an exit by helping them prepare along the way. So that's one of our big points at SeatonHill is we will work with you to help you with deal prep. Now, we get involved in other things too. There's crisis management, and about every client we have has some kind of crisis at some point or another. Or we help them raise funds. In one case, I helped somebody negotiate through a very bad quarrel they were having with a key distributor. But for the most part, though, it all comes back to exits and exit valuation and helping people get ready for, as they said, the biggest transaction of their lives.
Now, you're coming in with a different perspective, especially as the buy side coming with the corporate world. What is, you mentioned there's certain things that the mid to smaller market could have done to really change the trajectory. What are some kind of common mistakes you just shake your head like, just one little fix here could have changed the whole conversation?
There's multiple things. And one is have your books and your records in order before you come to market. Don't make it up as you go, because as they said, there's going to be an intense due diligence period, and don't not be able to answer questions, or don't give the wrong answers, or don't give stupid answers. Okay. You're not helping yourselves during the process. And I've been through it. You come to a point where you say, hey, look, we'd still like to buy your business, but we've learned these things now, and we're going to have to buy it at 75% of what we said a month ago. Another thing is not having a professional advisor. Okay. And you get people who think they can work their way through this, and then all of a sudden they can't. Sometimes you find they have attorneys that have to rev their client up a little bit and get in a fight, and basically it jacks up the legal fees and doesn't help get the transaction done. So that's a different problem that I've seen. And I guess another one is the word emotion that they used earlier too, where you see these people get very emotional in these situations, and there's nobody to walk them back, if you will, or act as an intermediary when you've got an upset seller. So those are some of the things I've seen. And there's very common themes. You see it over and over again.
So it kind of give a quick bullet point of things that can really blow up a deal, whether it's just the seller being emotional about it or trying it out themselves and realizing, oh, I'm in deep waters. To hit on another subject that you talked about, having clean books, having things ready to go. And sometimes, let's just say that there's certain numbers that might not be so great. What's the difference based on all your years of experience? Someone who just came out very transparent, like here's the book, 1 year off here, then the rest is all right, versus someone who's trying to, for lack of a better, just try to be muddy the waters. and then drop the value? Like which experience or approach should the seller have? Coming fully transparent, here's the good and the bad and the ugly, versus someone who's trying to like dress up a pig.
And let's face it, there are pigs out there.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's good pigs and bad pigs. But I would say the best approach is ahead of time, sit down with your advisors and think, okay, so I'm thinking of exiting in 3 years. What things should I do now? What do I need to clean up? And get somebody like us to come in who've been in the trenches and figure out how to get the books right, make them clean, make them understandable, make your officers be able to explain them. Okay? And don't try to, I don't want to use the exact word, but don't try to fake your way through the transaction. If there's something that you're trying to hide, they're going to find it. Okay. Don't try to hide it. And be able to tell the story of the numbers. Don't just throw down a balance sheet and a P&L that come out of QuickBooks and say, here's our data. Understand the story and understand what you're giving these people. And those are things that a professional advisor can help you with, whether it's these guys, and I'm sure they've done it plenty of times. We can do it. And sometimes you put together a team that can do it.
So as you're kind of working with your clients, getting that story and working collaboratively with other professionals, from your experience working in small and middle market, what is some quick things that not just cleaning up the books, things that can, as they're listening to you now, oh, they're thinking about it. I want to exit, let's say, call it 3-year time horizon. What are some low-hanging fruits they can just clean up right away?
Okay, well, make sure that what I would actually do is probably run some kind of sell-side quality of earnings review. Okay, and have somebody come in and just look at it in a very analytical way and determine what the EBITDA really is and what kind of adjustments there might be to EBITDA. That would be one. I would say having your company prepared to be able to answer questions and having your CEO be able to answer questions would be another thing I would try to do. Understand what's in your balance sheet. Okay, a lot of people don't. Have your tax act together. If you haven't filed your returns, and I know that might seem like a silly thing, but they don't always do that. Make sure that all those compliance boxes are checked. Don't find out about it during due diligence. Okay, have it ready. Your contracts, okay? As they say, you're buying intangibles, and sometimes your contracts are your intangibles. Know where your contracts are. Know that you have signed versions of them and not earlier drafts, and be able to produce them. Okay. And if they've expired, get them renewed. Okay? If there's a bad clause in there, most favored nations clause is one that often comes along and causes problems. Try to negotiate your way out of it ahead of time versus having it show up during due diligence. One other thing I would say too is sales tax often derails these things. Okay. And you'll often find that people don't realize they have a sales tax problem until a transaction comes along. Then they find out they do, and then the numbers start escalating. So those are a few things I would watch for.
Okay. And so we hit on the things that could derail a plan. What about some things that can strengthen the value or the worth of the business?
I would say get a professional advisor of some sort. I'm not necessarily saying hire us or hire them, but get somebody who's been through this before. Get somebody you're comfortable with. Understand who might buy your business and why. Practice a little bit, okay? Talk about the different scenarios. Is private equity right for you? I've seen situations where people don't want to touch private equity. And the reason is, as they say, your company is your baby and your employees are your family. And there are horror stories about private equity coming in and slashing the workforce. And I've had owners go to non-PE buyers and say, please buy my business because I don't want to have to sell to private equity.
So to touch on that as well, are they looking for approaching other businesses that kind of in a similar field? Or like walk us through that perspective, because there's definitely that obvious perspective where they've seen the horror stories. Like, I don't want to do that to my family business, my community.
Sure. You have to sit down and think, what is the universe of people who might be able to buy? And oftentimes it might be a competitor. Sometimes it might be somebody who runs a similar business to yours, but in a different geography, or an adjacent geography would be ideal. Okay, you're selling in Missouri and the buyer might be selling in Illinois, and it's a perfect fit. So those are good things you could try. Sometimes there are strategic buyers, okay, and that's actually your ideal situation because you'll probably get the best valuation in that case. But a professional can help you think through who the likely buyers might be for your business, and then you can start thinking of ways you can target them.
Now, coming back to kind of what started this whole conversation, as you're coming in as the person with experience on the corporate CFO side of things, what is it that you now at SeatonHill provide for now these business owners? Because for sometimes, because the term of fractional this, fractional that, it's not so new anymore, but still fresh in industry. And for family businesses or smaller businesses, they might be thinking, oh, I'm not that size just yet to have either fractional, full-blown executive side of things in regarding to my leadership team. Help us, at least the market or listener, understand, like, when should they start considering having a fractional X coming in to help them?
So I think it's when you get to 10 to 20 million. And here's why. You can get somebody who's a seasoned executive, whether it's finance or marketing, IT, okay, sales. You can get that person for a day a week, a half a day a week, 20 hours a month, whatever your budget might provide. But you can get the strategic vision and the strategic oversight from a seasoned executive at a price that fits your budget. Okay? And I think that it's a good idea to bring those type of people in sooner rather than later, just to help you see things that maybe you can't otherwise see, and to point out things that you might be missing. It happens all the time. We come in, and usually in the first day, we notice a bunch of things. In fact, sometimes it's so bad that you don't want to unload on the guy all at once. But I think the value it's certainly there. Okay. And if a business owner thinks they know it all, and sometimes they do, I think they can certainly benefit from a fresh perspective. And that's the kind of thing you get from a more seasoned C-level executive.
Yeah, we actually did touch upon sometimes the business owner or founder would realize, oh, I've grown it from, let's say, from 1 to 5 or 15 million now to really go to the next level. I'm stretched beyond to my boundary or borders of expertise. Is that kind of where people like you yourself will come in to help navigate that conversation or train someone to help them pick up that ball?
We'll do that sometimes because we tend to be their trusted advisor. The other scenario that's similar to that is they might say, I have a person running this area and they were great when I was 3 million. Now I'm 30 million. I think they're in over their head. Can you come in and help that person get up to speed, or help me find somebody to come in and supplement that person? We'll do that a lot too.
So now, before you mentioned, as you're coming in, people were just engaging with a fractional CFO or fractional anyone for the first time ever, and you're noticing some major things that kind of pops up at you. What are the kind of top 2 or 3 things that is pretty common as you're coming in and engaging with a client for the first time?
One is staff that's in over their head. Okay, which is, it can be fixable. We're not there to get rid of people's jobs. We're there to help the companies do better. So that's one thing we see. Another is lack of what I would call strategic level reporting. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that might be not just in the case of finance, presenting a P&L and a balance sheet, but comparing to industry peers and looking at certain metrics and seeing how you stack up against other companies in your industry or whatever. So that would be another thing. Board reporting and investor reporting, often the kind of thing that a fractional executive might come in and do, because a board or investor might say, I'm not getting the kind of answers I want. I need somebody that can come in and tell me and help me understand. We come in and fill that role a lot of times too.
So for our listeners that are hearing this for the first time, whether it's engaging with a fractional CFO like yourself, or cleaning up their books, or getting some low-hanging fruit things cleaned up to be able to strengthen the value of their business, if there's one major thing that you would recommend to these younger, smaller, or mid-sized companies, now, due to the perspective and a hat of a buyer, because you've had that experience, what is one major thing that they can definitely implement today to help them for the long term?
My recommendation would be to get outside advisors, even if it's like an advisory board or a mentor or whatever, that they can go to with issues and get a trusted opinion. It may not be what they want to hear. Okay, sometimes you have to hear bad news, but hear it from somebody who's been there and done that, and get that kind of perspective rather than looking totally inward and relying only on the feedback you're getting from your staff, your people, because let's face it, they're going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
So getting that outside perspective is critical. That's one of the things we notice a lot.
So for our listeners, how can they best find you to get your expertise and your advice, not just on the buyer side, but now you're helping for small and mid-sized business to prepare them for an eventual exit?
Sure. So if they wanted to find me, okay, there are multiple ways. One is SeatonHill Partners has a website, and we're all out there. You're welcome to visit our website, and you can contact us through the website. I have a LinkedIn page, Lyle Newkirk, And Seton Hill has a LinkedIn page as well. So those are 3 different ways you can find us, is just by going through LinkedIn or going to Seton Hill website or Seton Hill LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, for our listeners, as hear from the theme from our 3 amazing guests, in terms of preparation for succession and eventual sale of a business, continuing with our theme of prior podcast episode, is to bring out guests back in, as we're going to be closing out the show, is the question of, since we're talking about sale and succession, what is one major question that they should definitely have an answer for to prepare them, whether it is on the business side or the mental or emotional side? If they need to answer this question before they go down the trajectory of starting, let's call it the ball, of having a exit planning conversation. So again, the question is, what is the one question they need to find an answer for, whether it's on the business side or the mental emotional side, to prepare them to engage a business exit conversation? For our listeners, this is the typical compliance legalese episodes, or not episode, but rather section, so you can fast forward this if you want. The show is sponsored and brought to you by yours truly, Anthony Chen at Lighthouse Financial Network. Securities and advisory services offered through Osaic, member FINRA SIPC. Osaic is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here is independent of Osaic. Our main office address is up in 575 Broad Hollow Road in Melville, New York, 11747. You can best reach me by my email, anthonychen at lfnllc.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, which is just my name, Anthony Chen. And if you find the guy with glasses and with elephant banner in behind him, you found the right guy. Bringing our guests back in, again, the question is, what is the one question for our listeners that they need to find an answer for, whether it is on the business side or the emotional, mental preparation side, that they need to find an answer for to even consider engaging an exit planning conversation? So bringing us back in, we'll start with Rick.
Thanks. That's a good question. I would say, is what is the most important thing that you'd like to take away from a transaction? I'd like an answer to that, right? Is it price? Is it purchase price? Is it the most cash up front? Is it, I want to not have this pressure of the day-to-day over my head? Is it, I want to sell to someone that's going to keep my name? So you can't have everything in a sale. Everyone tries to craft the best deal they can. There's give and take. For example, if you want the most price, most value, highest valuation, you might have to sell to a group that is going to change the name. So what is the most important thing that you want out of the transaction? And then we can always try to work backwards from there.
Great. Joe?
Yeah, I think tying it together to the preparedness conversation, it's the question I would want answered is, if a buyer showed up tomorrow with a fair offer, could I defend my financials? Could I explain my operations to justify the price? It's too often we see owners who are rushing to sell, but they're not adequately prepared. And the amount of money that could potentially be left on the table in those situations is substantial. So preparing is everything.
Thank you. And closing us out, Lyle.
So I would ask, are you really prepared to give up control of this thing that you've run for the last 10 or 15, 20, 30 years? And you might think that's an easy question, but it's not. And I have seen transactions crater in the latter stage when the seller gets cold feet. And I'm not sure I really want to do this, or I'm not sure I want that guy calling the shots. I know more than he does. So I think that you need to make sure that they understand exactly what's going to happen when all the papers get signed, because they're not going to be in charge anymore. And sometimes it's a big emotional letdown.
So thank you all for your insights. I can't really top those questions at all. As we're winding down and closing down the show, I'd like to close us out with what's called Anthony's financial take. Continuing, piggybacking off the theme in terms of preparation for a succession plan in the financial world, the question that we would always want to ask is, what does a ideal retirement lifestyle look like? And it's think really hard, not just, oh yeah, I'm going to go out golfing and fishing. No, after, let's say, 6 months of golf, unless you're like a PGA Tour kind of guy, you're eventually going to get a little bored. But to really run through the scenario of, what does my retirement ideal retirement lifestyle really look like? How do I want it to be structured? And that's my financial take of today's theme. Thank you for listening in to Family Business Radio. Until next time.